fucking piece of shit that Barack Obama was, and there he is being transparent in his corruption. He's admitting he's corrupt in front of every reporter in Washington, D.C. That's the irony of that. Go ahead, Max.
Well, maybe they thought that he was not going to do that. Maybe they thought he was mocking Hillary Clinton for doing it. You know?
No, but he did do that.
Maybe they really.
But the fact,
and then he proceeded to do just that.
Yes.
I mean, it would have been funny if he went out and built houses for the poor through Habitat for Humanity and, lived humbly. But Obama, he went to the
What do you mean?
Baker Institute for Public Policy, the centrist pro-corporate outfit at Rice University in Houston, and spoke at a black tie event in November 2017 for an audience of oil industry tycoons and Wall Street people. And he said, you should just say thank you, please. Just thank me for what I did for you. And they proceeded to raise $5.4 million there. He's raked in $400,000 speaking fees for big banks. I mean, he proceeded to do exactly what he said he was going to do at what was supposed to be this kind of like funny self roast. And nobody cares. I mean,
those are reporters
is unscathed.
Those are reporters he's doing that in front of. That's not bankers. Those are reporters, and they're all our corrupt leader, yay, we'll never write a story about this.
At the 2018 White House press correspondence dinner, Randy Credico, our friend, was violently dragged out for staging a protest for the publisher and journalist Julian Assange, who, of course, is never mentioned on stage there. And then the following year, Ron Chernow, I remember him getting up, the guy who wrote Hamilton.
Yeah.
And, he gave us the kind of liberal nightmare of Lin-Manuel Miranda's, nerdcore rap musical of Hamilton. Anyway, Ron Chernow was sort of the intellectual that they hosted, and he said, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, we're not on Team Republican or Team Democrat. We're on Team America. And all the journalists got up and cheered.
Yeah,
and that's really the problem with Washington and the problem with journalism is not the polarization, it's where they find consensus. The consensus is on supporting Wall Street and the war state. They prefer it to be wrapped up in someone who's calm and composed and seems to be pro-science like Barack Obama, and that's what they're going to try to get out of Joe Biden. I don't know if that's going to work because Biden's kind of like...
There's not going to be a ban.
Just imagine the debate between him and Trump. It's going to be so entertaining.
It will be entertaining. Do you find that videotape a little stunned? I was stunned, actually. Did you?
I hadn't seen that.
I hadn't either until yesterday. I forgot where I came across it. But do you find that? I even in these times. But that is exactly what Chris Hedges talks about when he says they steal and cheat right out in the open. They don't even hide it anymore. That's it, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of Mike Pompeo, who's now Secretary of State, going to Texas A&M last year. And just joking, I remember at the CIA, we lied, we cheated, we stole, and everyone in the audience who are like students, impressionable minds, they laugh and clap at this.
Yeah,
I'll be showing in the next piece I publish exactly what Mike Pompeo's CIA did in the case of Julian Assange. It's no laughing matter.
That's correct.
But it's
all joke. Numbers.
Max Blumenthal, Gray Zone. Everybody check it out. Check out his book. It's right over his right shoulder, The Management of Savagery. You see it right there? You see it right there? No, that's it. There you go.
I can, but it won't do anything.
Doing great journalism as always. Thanks for doing what you do. Thanks for coming on the show and adding your expertise and humor. I appreciate it. Max Blumenthal, not a gray hair on his head. Thank you for coming on our show.
Thanks a lot, Jimmy. Glad you couldn't see the gray hair.
Okay. Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?
I'll try. Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. It's gonna switch me. Well, Alan, I don't know who you are. I don't care who you are. And then Bill Gates. That's the YouTube algorithm. All right. If you want to see another video of Jimmy Dore Show, you gotta click the channel, then click on videos, and then you got access to all those videos. Best option, open a new tab, and Power Effects. That's it. That's all you gotta do. Cause fucking YouTube.
Julian Assange,
is
right? So
trying
you're
to
a Pulitzer
censor-
Prize winning journalist. Wow. I'm still stunned at the lack, at the situation and the lack of outrage by the American press as they rally around a hack and a clown like Jim Acosta when someone's actually being persecuted for publishing actual secrets that damage the state. That they're ignoring it and pretending like he is actually a traitor, but he's from another country. So could you talk about the cowardice of American journalism and politicians around Julian Assange?
So this gets to the whole when Chomsky writes about the liberal class. So what happened? Julian publishes through the courage of Chelsea Manning examples of egregious war crimes committed by American forces, primarily in Iraq, also Afghanistan. And the American press, the New York Times, my old employer, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, they all publish it. And somehow people have misinterpreted this as an act of courage. It isn't. They were astute enough to realize that if they didn't publish it, alternative publications would publish it, and it essentially shame them into doing their journalism. We go back to Bob Scheer, who was the editor-in-chief at Truthdig before he and all the rest of us were pushed out. Bob was at Rampart, so Rampart's was COINTELPRO. Rampart's, they published Soul on Ice. They published the first reports about the Vietnam War and what was actually happening, including the iconic photo of the young girl running naked down a road burning with napalm, which King saw and prompted King to denounce the war on April 4th, 1967 at Riverside Church. So it's always been the role of the alternative press, which is not constrained by, commercialism, to speak truth, to shame the traditional press into doing their job. And that's what happened. That's why the New York Times, for instance, ran. But they hated Julian and Assange and WikiLeaks from the start. And so they published the information, and almost immediately they flipped into doing the state's bidding and destroying Julian. And I'm not going to get into the whole Swedish thing, except to say it was bullshit. And I looked very closely at it, as did Niels Melzer and several others, the rapporteur on torture, who visited Julian in Belmarsh and said this guy is under psychological torture. And then, of course, Julian's sin was that he went after all of the power elite with the Podesta emails, exposing Hillary Clinton's acceptance of $675,000 for 3 speeches to Goldman Sachs, a sum that can only be described as a bribe. The fact that the Clinton campaign was actively working to make Trump the Republican nominee because they thought she could walk all over him. The fact that she was saying one thing to Wall Street and quite another thing to, as a candidate. And people will say, well, they should have exposed it after the campaign. And I say, well, I suppose you could argue that. But what you're really saying is the American public doesn't have a right to know.
That's right.
And if you do argue that, you better not call yourself a journalist. And Julian was a friend. I visited him several times in the embassy when he was in Ecuador. I have tremendous admiration for him, as I do with Chelsea Manning, as I do for Edward Snowden, as I do for Kiriakou, Bill Binney, all these people who have risked their career, and in Julian's case, his life, to stand up and speak the truth about empire. And the liberal class does what the liberal class is designed to do. Let's go again back to Chomsky. It posits itself as the moral arbiter of the society. And it is permitted that role within a capitalist democracy because when it will never question the motives and the intentions of the ruling elites. But when you actually do begin to question the motives and intentions of the ruling elites, when you begin to expose them for who they are, then you use the liberal class, which is what's happened with Julian, to turn them into discredited pariahs, which they've also done, by the way, with Ralph. And so that's why you traditionally allow a liberal institution to exist. It can ameliorate the system. It can address some of the more egregious excesses of the system, but it fundamentally buttresses and defends the system itself. I was a victim of this when I was denouncing, and I'd been the Middle East bureau chief for the New York Times, denouncing Bush's call to invade Iraq. On the day of the invasion, I was giving 15 minutes or 12 minutes, I can't remember, on Fresh Air, talking about why this invasion, and I am an Arabic speaker, I spent 7 years in the Middle East, months of my life in Iraq, why it was going to be the fiasco that it was, not to mention the fact that preemptive war is under international law a war crime. It's a criminal war of aggression. And then followed me was Michael Ignatieff, who was a friend, and arguing, with a heavy heart and telling us that he'd opposed the war in Vietnam, but we had to go in there and liberate the people of Iraq and save the women of Afghanistan, as if the 101st Airborne is somehow going to save the women of Afghanistan, and that is the traditional role of the liberal class.
So I got into this journalism thing or the news thing sideways, right? I came from comedy. I was always interested in politics. I did a political Comedy Central special, and that got the attention of the Young Turks, and so they called me in to do commentary, and then I started, and that got me on the public radio station here in California, and now it's nationwide, and so my whole thing is I just am gobsmacked on a daily basis at how bad journalism is. Not just bad, but horrible. It's worse than even what Chomsky said in Manufacturing Consent. But at its very best, that's what it is. If you look at Russiagate, now again, I'm just a nightclub comedian who's entertained drunks for 30 years, and I start doing a YouTube news show, and I see through Russiagate within about a half a second. I could see how ridiculous this was and how there was absolutely no evidence to support anything they were saying. But the entire U.S. media, with the exception of maybe 5 people, repeated this unbelievable evidence-free conspiracy theory while they wagged their finger at people like Alex Jones. And so I consequently have Aaron Matei on, who won an award for his debunking of the Russiagate narrative in The Nation. So tip of the hat to Katrina vanden Heuvel, who took a lot of heat for publishing him in The Nation, doing the right thing. But he's still a pariah, and although he won an award for it, and whenever I had him on, I always how can you... I don't even want to be friends with these people. I think that's what allows me to do what I do, is because everybody in journalism, that's their world. So no matter how much they're a truth teller, they still need the affirmation of their peers, and they still need to be in that career. I come from comedy, and every person I ever respected in comedy has patted me on the head. So I got that fixed. I don't need Chris Hayes or Rachel Maddow to tell me I'm doing a good job, because I don't give a fuck what they think. I care what Brian Regan thinks, right? I care what Patton Oswalt thinks, Bill Burr thinks, people who are my Norm Macdonald, my comedic heroes. They've all did it for me. So even if you're a journalist, it's a part of human psychology. You still want to be on the in crowd, which is why 99.9% of journalists, my personal opinion, are worthless, because they'll never go against the herd mentality, like was just revealed in Russiagate. So when push comes to shove, you can never count on journalism in America. That's how I feel. And I know that's your profession and you're an award winner. So if comedy was as bad as journalism, I would feel horrible. How do you feel?
Yeah, it's sad. It's careerism. So let's take the first Gulf War. Anybody who reported with me out of the Middle East didn't have any difference in terms of my assessment, and certainly my outspokenness on behalf of the Palestinians. They just recognize that it's not good for their career. And I think that's what drives a lot of it. People read that they read the zeitgeist. They understand that clobbering the Democratic Party for their complicity in the reconfiguration of American society into an oligarchy and the betrayal of the working class is not good for their career. So let's go after Putin and Russia. And by the way, I'm not saying Russia didn't interfere in the election. They probably did. Every election I've covered overseas, we interfered with. We gave Boris Yeltsin $1.5 billion in order to be reelected in '96, I believe. So, but it didn't. That's not why Trump is elected. And so if you go after the centers of power, the democratic centers of power, then you're going to be pushed out. Matt Taibbi wrote a good book. It's called Hate Inc., which you should get.
Right.
Because it kind of updates Chomsky, because a lot of things have changed with a 24-hour news cycle. Because in the old system, it was, Tom Brokaw or Walter Cronkite, and it was kind of this trusted father figure, middle of the road objectivity. That all broke down with cable. I mean, it's a fake. It's not real. And now it's really kind of Orwell's, 3 Minutes of Hate. So we hate them, they hate us. That's what sells now. And so on Taibbi's book, on one half of the cover is Sean Hannity, on the other is Rachel Maddow, because they do exactly the same thing.
They do.
And for those of us who actually come out of journalism, it's completely apparent. But you're right. It's burlesque. It's show business. It's vaudeville. But it's not journalism. These people couldn't report a story if you put a gun to their head.
I gotta leave, asshole.
I couldn't agree with you more. Well, listen, we've had. It's shocking that I can, on a daily basis, out-report CNN and the Washington Post when it comes to Syria, Libya, Iran, Venezuela, Brazil. It's just amazing. Like, I just know what they're going to say is a lie. It's wrong. So it's my theory. I remember I was on a panel with Cenk Uygur, and we were talking about how do you believe that? What do you believe from the government? What do you not believe? How do you? And I said, well, my jumping off point is the government is lying, and I just have to find out where.
Yeah, well, that's right. Power lies. I mean, all governments lie, as I.F. Stone said, and that was when I did journalism, because I wasn't in Washington. I wasn't doing lunch. I was in Sarajevo, or I was in El Salvador, I was in Gaza. My job was to show how they lied, and it meant that I was not only at war with my own government, but at war with the Washington Bureau of the New York Times. And so balance at the paper became, my reporting from Gaza next to a column of probably exactly the same length, given exactly the same display with a lie. So people could believe what they wanted to believe.
Yes.
But you're right. That's what Julian Assange, why he's such a heroic figure, and why I admire him so much. And I think from following these court proceedings, it's fixed. I think he's going to be lynched under the Espionage Act, even though he's not an American citizen. WikiLeaks is not a U.S.-based publication, and that is the end, because there is actually, under the Espionage Act, which is our equivalent of our British Foreign Secrets Act, it is a crime to possess classified information, but all of us in journalism, myself included, have published classified information. But once you create that legal precedent by sending Julian to prison, his sentence is potentially 175 years, then it's over. Then there is no way to shine a lens into the inner workings of power. That's where we're headed.
Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?
Bye-bye. Goodbye. Then you eat from pot
Intellectual Arthur Schlesinger Jr. got it wrong. And Ronald
But I
Reagan,
guess
graduate
still
of a
gotta
little
leave,
school in the middle of the
area.
country, Eureka College, got it right. A decade after these two quotations, the Soviet Union went out of existence. How come?
Well, Arthur Schlesinger is part of a long and one might say distinguished line of people who have been absolutely wrong for decades and actually for centuries. So this is just one of many statements that you could quote. It's not even the only time that Arthur Schlesinger Jr. was wrong by miles. He was wrong in attributing the
I gotta leave.
coverage of the Great Depression to Franklin D. Roosevelt.
You haven't done anything.
He was
you
wrong
got
in arguing that the tax cuts were going to make it, under Andrew Mellon, we're going to make it harder to balance the budget.
What's this?
They not only balanced the budgets, they had a surplus and paid down the national debt.
No.
And even after John Kennedy's tax cuts, Treasury...
No, bye-bye. That's fine. Really, you want to balance the budget, I can tell you like one little tip, and you're good immediately.
I sense the good in your heart.
Dun, 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 dun. Here we go with the cheating. Here you see the hand flicker? Check it. It's gonna. Check it out, guys. The pot. It's gonna combat the kitty. Yeah, 1 damage again. Dumbass. Why the fuck did people do that? I swear. One, two, three, four. Okay. Done. Heal. Oh no, what else sacrifice? I guess it's open. Well, I'll block with my wall. Thank you very much. Johnny takes 1 damage. That's fine. It's fine. He's just being a cunt.
Enough.
Even Johnny's getting tired. Enough.
I constantly seek to innovate.
It's you. Goodbye. Fuck all of you. Yeah, now you left, huh? Now you left, you fucking cunt. Fuck you and people like you.